lovely holiday worth celebrating.
Hello there, Internet. Mogwai here, and I got another episode of Progress Day for you guys today. Episode number 6, right? I'm joined by the usual crew. We got Swim and Panda. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello, guys. Good to be back. And this episode is, as usual, every month. There's an episode that's a patch note episode, and this is one of them. So patch notes 1.4 or patch 1.4 is arriving on Tuesday now. The notes, it changed. And the patch will go live on Tuesday, but it'll be in the game on Tuesday, but it'll be working and functionally on Wednesdays. Correct?
Correct. We have prior access to the Spanish patch notes here, but we're recording this on Monday, but this will be going up when the patch notes are already revealed, so we won't be doing any spoilers, but it's gonna be interesting to translate some of these, and I know we had a quite it was quite the task last time, so yeah, that's basically
I'll do my best to translate. If there's any awkward pauses, because I'm trying to understand what's going on these patch notes in Spanish. So all right, starting off, obviously 1.4, big changes that were coming up that were talked about, tweeted about. It's not a big surprise. First of all, epics were being looked at. A lot of epics that just weren't doing what they had to do. They weren't, seeing play. They weren't, epics normally are supposed to be these cards that are game changers, that are, really valuable, that you build decks around them even. And it wasn't happening with many, many cards in many regions. So I think now that, especially once the game gets a bit more balanced, the devs start looking at other ways to innovate kind of the meta without just being nerfs and buffs, but also, making things see more play by changing them or reworking them. So this patch was kind of focused on that. It also mentions Freljord being kind of a weak region. But
Man, I don't know about that.
Well, I mean, this patch addresses that in many ways. But that was kind of the focus of the patch going into it. Those were the two main focuses, I think. And also, of course, the Yoink package was being looked at and has been addressed to some degree. We'll see if it'll be enough, but we'll talk about it in a bit as well. Also mentions gauntlets coming to the game. It's been mentioned before. We know the details, but just quickly, what do you guys think about, after reading what the gauntlet effectively is? There'll be kind of these 7 kind of like expeditions, but with your own decks. The first one will have no different changes, or can test like the technology behind it and make sure it works properly. And the second one, which comes out starts on the 3rd of July, will be a singleton gauntlet. So you can only use one card per deck. What do you guys think? And the rewards will be mostly cosmetic, which I think is a very good thing and a good incentive to play them. But what's your just general opinions on gauntlets?
Yeah, I mean, they're very cool. It's just a nice extra game mode that, I mean, to be honest, I don't expect it to be like a thing that people play for a super long period of time. But every time there's a new one, people will have fun for a couple of days. People will talk about different strategies. It'll be fun. Little events.
Yeah, completely agree. It's nice to have different ways to play the game, but I also think, like Swim, that it's not gonna be something really massive or anything. But it's gonna be nice, and I'm definitely excited for also like a bit of an alternative, competitive experience to ladder. For example, I know some people are not really as into just grinding ranked, and instead want to have like a shorter sort of like test that can be similar to a tournament, and I think it's cool because of that too. So yeah, looking forward to it.
One last mention, which is pretty important, kind of looking at the future. It mentions in this gauntlet paragraph in the patch notes that they're kind of working and testing the technology to be able to run tournament modes, to create tournaments, grand, like large scale tournaments inside the game client. Cool. So it's not exactly what's coming in this patch right now, but it's a good, sign for the future.
It's awesome to know that they're working on it. Like I'm really hyped for that.
Exactly.
I think tournament mode is a really good step, because there's a lot of things that the game kind of needs, like, for example, systems for like picks and bans, maybe some interesting different formats, and some kind of like some better timer system so that we can avoid awkwardnesses like that one time. Yeah.
And I think that's part of they're testing technology and just like the insider stuff, so that it works for the future as well, and they can add on to it as time goes on in the system. So definitely a good sign. We're also seeing the season finish with this patch. It's going to be the new season coming up, Season of Fortune coming up, And obviously there will be rank resets, which is a pretty big deal. 8 divisions you drop, so if you're Masters, you'll be Plat 4 at the beginning, kind of like the last reset. And you'll get your reward and stuff, but I mean, pretty basic stuff. We already saw it with like the actual release of the game, so same thing again, pretty much will be happening on Wednesday, I assume, the 24th of June.
Yeah.
And another big kind of internal thing, the Masters MMR system is changing. It's changing from a rank system to a LP system, kind of like they have it in TFT. And it should be much more precise and there will be much more clarity in how, they're conveying you're going up and down on ladder by how much, and it'll be much more clear, I think. So it'll allow people to, and probably, it'll be easier to climb if you're doing well, and it won't be as punishing as it is now, I think.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I've never really been knowledgeable regarding MMR, how exactly it works and everything. So I'm not sure how much of an upgrade this will be personally, but I do know other people like speak highly of this change, and I definitely think we need something at least different to. I think the state of the ladder, at least through my perspective, which is not, like I said, not as knowledgeable, but at least I know that it is better than before. Before it was like super swingy, right? The problem is like right now, to my knowledge, it is impossible to reach rank 1, which makes a lot of sense because otherwise, I would be there. But
and me too. Yeah. But it's completely impossible. Yeah. So there's no way to do it.
Exactly. So we are incredible players, and proof of that. So yeah, I am excited for it. So. But I don't know much about it, honestly. Like, I'm not gonna lie.
I think I'm worried about, I don't know if it changes just the clarity because you're seeing the actual LP, so you know what you're climbing and how far you are from X rank and all this, or the actual functionality of the rank and how the rank behaves, let's say, how the system behaves, That's what I'm worried about, because from reading what is on the patch notes, it seems like they're working on clarity and making it, more clear what, where you are on the ladder and how to climb and how to all this. But is it actually changing how the system functions? Because if it doesn't, then it's going to feel the same, right? You still can't reach round 1. You can see you can't reach it. It's the only difference. But it still sucks, so I'm not sure.
We'll just have to see, I guess. Eventually they'll get it right. I
hope so.
Optimism.
That's all for the kind of like systems changes and game modes and features and all this. And now we're going to move on to the actual meat of the patch notes, which are actual changes to champions and cards.
Let's go.
Starting off with champions, the first champion that has been buffed is Darius. His level 2 now has 1 more life. So not a huge change, but it does make him a bit more resilient in that mid game. Kind of saw Hecarim be going from 6 to 5 health and that being a big difference. This is the opposite. So is it a big deal?
Nope. I mean, so the thing with Darius is like, it almost can't change. Well, now, I will say, Darius could be better in this patch just because other things are probably getting nerfed, maybe making room for him. But the biggest thing here is, like, Darius didn't really need that 1 point of health. Because he only flips when the opponent's at 10, usually him surviving the combat he engages isn't really that important. You're just kind of, like, killing them that turn or you're not. And usually, the way he gets stopped is stuff like Will or maybe Frostbite, which the 1 health doesn't help against.
Yeah, I mean, there was one case, like, I had a live recording today, and his health did matter. It was like a very specific case. I had like a leveled up Twisted Fate, and I was able to finish him off with a Get Excited plus the gold card, right? But those sorts of scenarios are super niche, and most of the time it is indeed just going to be either a stun or a recall effect or a direct a Frostbite or a Vengeance. That's how you're going to get rid of him. So ultimately, especially because it's after he levels up. If he came in as a 6/6, which I think would be fine personally, I think I would have liked to see a buff in health for the prior, like the actual, like, before he levels up version. I don't know how to phrase that in English, but I would have liked to seen it like that, right? I agree. I don't think this is gonna really change much. But maybe I'm wrong.
I think it's one of those changes where it's a very, very small change, but it's not going to hurt, It isn't the greatest champion, gets a little bit of a buff. Maybe he survives a few more, situations where he wouldn't have before, and that's a bit of a plus. It's obviously not going to change him and make him like all of a sudden like a spotlight in the meta, but I think it can't hurt to just try and have these little number changes and see how it affects the champion's play rate.
Yeah,
but yeah.
I think he's a bit awkward because it's obvious they want him to be a very basic like starter champion. They don't want his effect to be too complicated, but there's kind of like, I don't think there's going to be a way to make him properly like reliably competitive with just like
with him being so vanilla, you mean? Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's just like, it's very difficult to get through. But I think it's fine him being kind of like on a lower tier, and we have seen him kind of splash into some kind of like cute semi-competitive decks. I think he's fine.
Yeah, I agree. Next champion, a champion that was in the public eye very weak, has not seen any play, has not appeared in any kind of meta decks for a while now, and that is Anivia. And the change, she is going from 7 costs, so 7 mana, down to 6.
I mean, I think any sort of like cost reduction like this, especially from like a 7 drop to a 6 drop, I think is huge. Will this make Anivia viable? I think there are multiple factors that have to be considered, but at the very least, this is a big step in the right direction. Yeah, it's a huge difference. Like, people undermine this a lot, but I'd like to remind those who have been before rising tides of the Rasa phenomenon. Like, he went from 7 mana to 8 mana, and that just completely changed the card. And it works the same way the other way around, right? Big buff. Like, unlike Darius, this is a big buff. How impactful it'll be, time will tell. I'm a fan of Anivia, and she has felt really slow as of late. Especially, it's kind of rough when they compare her to Misfortune, right? Like, they say, oh, it's a 7 mana Misfortune, but it's not. That's not really accurate. But there is a little bit of truth in that, right? In a way, but definitely a great buff. I like it.
Yeah, I think the Go ahead, Swim.
I was just gonna say, I personally am on the side of, like, I don't think it's gonna do enough. Like you said, I mean, it's kind of like a 7 mana Misfortune, and now it's a 6 mana Misfortune. And at the end of the day, it can still only it's still reliable on you being kind of like enlightened. And we're in like the game has really sped up since the last patch. Like, decks are much more kind of like aggressive. We don't know if that's gonna maintain throughout this patch, but I don't expect the meta is gonna slow it down enough for Anivia to really be sticking to high tier decks.
I think the biggest change when comparing her to Misfortune, sure, the effects are similar, but where Anivia has that bonus is more of a combo deck with like the Last Breath and like multiplying it, like we've seen it in like the beta even. That was kind of where people kind of cheesed their way into making pretty strong or annoying to deal with.
Chronicler with Ruin synergy, stuff like that, yeah, definitely. Yeah,
so that might be where, and especially like that's where the mana cost as well really becomes.
Or I also like, it's more of meme strategy, but it's decently competitive. I like I like to call it the Anivia Jutsu archetype, combining her with Dawn and Dusk with ramp for both her and Karma. It's not terrible. It's not a terrible deck. And now, it got a little bit better, but it is true that what you want out of Anivia is you want to be enlightened, like Swim said. So playing her 1 turn earlier, it really doesn't make as much of a difference, but it is still a monumental one. Like, you cannot undermine a cost reduction like this. It's very big.
Right. And like, I want to point out, people made that mistake with Karma. They were like, well, Karma's, you only play her on turn 10 anyway, so the +1 mana won't really nerf her that much, because usually at those stages in the game, you don't care about mana. But Anivia is the same way in the opposite direction. Like, 1 mana means a lot, even on turn 10.
This could prove to be better, like much better than we were expecting. Like, this could actually prove to make her like good. Like, it'll be. I'll be trying her out for sure.
I think a big thing with some of these champions that have very, very low play rates, it's because people don't have a reason to play them as well. Not just that they're that weak, as what the play rate is reflecting, but they're also just not played or experimented with or fine-tuned at all. So they don't find any kind of deck to call home and to find a place in the meta. And these changes, aside from obviously being a buff to the champion, and that's going to increase the play rate and win rate, it also makes people say, oh, let me try Anivia now that it's been buffed, and then let me make this deck with it, and then it becomes more popular. So it's kind of like a snowball effect. It happens with a lot of patches, I think. So that's also going to be relevant. I mean, just the fact that it's going to be experimented with and played with a lot more, and trying to find a deck that maybe fits somewhere in the meta is pretty big for Anivia as well. It was, like I said, completely forgotten in the past few months. And looking at the next champion, another Freljord champion, so Freljord trying to find a place in the meta, is Braum. And this is a pretty big change. His cost is getting nerfed from 3 to 4 mana, so he is more expensive, but
it's not nerf.
He has 1 power now, just base copy, 1 power, and the first time he gets hit for damage, he summons one of the Overwhelm Poros, so his level up ability, but without leveling up. So just straight off 1 power and has that ability only 1 time until he levels up.
Yeah.
The first time that happened, basically.
I gotta get this off my chest. Like, this is perhaps one of the changes that I'm most excited about. I read it wrong at first. I did not read for the first time every turn, so I kind of freaked out for a second. I thought this was going to be just incredibly broken, because it's just imagine like back-to-back transfusions just generating mighty Poros, you know. But I can't really express how much I love this change. I think it makes Braum an immediate threat, a value threat at that, coming onto the board on turn 4. It doesn't, like, now all of a sudden, like, Braum is no longer just completely destroyed by Will of Ionia like the prior version was. And while there is some inherent Poro synergy with the fact that he's generating mighty Poros from the get-go, I think he will definitely be strong enough to be just a value pick for any sort of like Freljord mid-range deck. But of course, you have to make sure you have to have the champion slot available for him, right? That's one of the things. But he definitely feels like a very powerful champion, and I believe he could potentially be metagame defining. Like, I think he's gonna be really good.
Yeah, I'm a little scared of this. This is like, so I mean, the biggest thing about Braum is he's very polarizing, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you buff him and then you keep him buffed, and you know, if they don't have hard removal or if they can't kill you like immediately, you have won the game, right?
Yeah.
But if they do have, you know, hard removal, or if they can kill you immediately, then you've basically lost the game. Like if you, you know, Braum and then buff into like Will of Ionia, you're pretty much out. But at this point in time, like when you look at how those exchanges go, like Braum versus Will or Braum versus Vengeance, you know, he'll summon 1 Poro for free, and then, you know, you buff him with, let's say, a Take Heart, who knows. And then once he gets like Willed or Vengeance, it doesn't even feel that bad. You have a 3/3. Like that's totally fine, right? So like at this point in time, like the only real counter to this card is just raw aggression. Like, and the really fast aggression too, because he comes out on turn 4 still. This could be really, really, really good.
Yeah, it's scary. Like, especially like the 5 health. 5 health, man. Like, good examples of like resilient engines that didn't seem like much at first. Are 4 mana Maokai, 5 mana Neverglade Collector. Those are hard to take down, and those have 4 health. This guy has 5 health and regeneration. Yeah. I'm the first thing I'm gonna try with Braum is a mixture with Noxus, just because I think he's insane with transfusion. Absolutely insane with transfusion. The fact that you can generate a 3/3 with Overwhelm at burst speed. Like, that is, well, also buff, like, that's crazy to me. That's just absolutely crazy to me. This guy, there's no way there's not gonna be a top tier deck with Braum, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited to see, like, but also, like, I do share a little bit of concern with Swim here, because I feel like we could be, like, walking into a Braum meta in a way, you know? So, yeah, and even the doggo is scared about it. So, yeah, it's really strong.
I think one more thing to note, obviously the Poro change for the unleveled version is huge, but looking at the power change from 0 to 1, for most units, that'd be okay. That's like a pretty big increase. Obviously, from 0 to 1, it's a big difference. But when you look at Braum, first he has regeneration, so he's very sticky. So he has much more than, he doesn't only have one. You know, some units and some champions, you can expect them to have 1 trade per game, and that's it, or 2 trades. But Braum, his whole thing is that he's supposed to be the stickiest champion in the game. Let's say, unless you have a spell to kill him, you're not going to kill him if he has regen and all this. So that's a huge change for him. And also for the level 2 version, he is also gaining +1/+1 to stats. So his health now goes up to 6 instead of 7.
Yeah.
But that extra stat goes into his power, so he'll be a 2/6 after he levels up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Regen.
I want to point out one last thing as well, which also kind of adds to me being very scared of Braum, which is that Freljord is a really good region right now. I would probably, like, you could say the strongest region in the game for sure.
Well, I think it's more of a symptom of like a few specific cards being very strong. Sure. You know, like They Who Endure, Sejuani, Fury of the North. But as a whole, like the region is still very lacking. Like right now, it's kind of like either the Sejuani or the They Who Endure region basically in the meta. Even though those decks are really strong. So. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to like.
No, I do agree with that. That is a very good point. But unless like there's some other nerfs coming out of Freljord, like for example, this is something that happens a lot in development, and we've actually seen it in some of the earlier patches before. There was one patch in particular where like Shadow Isles was kind of already like not the best region in the game, and people mostly agreed Demacia was the strongest. But like at that one point in time, they actually kind of over nerfed Shadow Isles and sort of didn't really touch Demacia while nerfing other things. And that's like the sort of thing you might be seeing here, which is a bit of like kind of like delayed response. Like Freljord has been really strong for like a month now. And especially based on like the note they made up top, they seem to feel like it's on the weaker side. So they're buffing it. And that can definitely create some dangerous situations. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I'm personally just excited to see like Freljord represented beyond Sejuani though. Like I think it was very much correct to buff these champions, but it is true that while we've seen a more of a cautious pattern from the live design team in the past, like for example when they initially reward Kalista, she was very underpowered because they've always been a little bit cautious, like I said, into like when redesigning a champion. But this time around they're clearly making a statement. It's like we're changing it up now. We may be going a little bit overboard. And if this thing proves to be too good, then we'll tone it down. Honestly, I like that. You know, as long as they don't go crazy with it. I like that's the beautiful thing about a digital card game, right? If it's too much, they can just fix it, and they will relatively. Like I think I'm excited for Braum. Like I definitely share concerns, but overall I'm excited for like a fresh new, because I love the character. And I'm really, really, really hyped to just build all sorts of different decks around him, and I think it's gonna be fun for sure.
I do agree with that.
So since we're talking about the kind of regional power levels, I'm just gonna quickly transition. Obviously, I did the survey again this month, and we got the results yesterday, and I posted them on Reddit. But someone was mentioning that he thinks Freljord is one of the strongest regions right now, and I'm not going to say I agree, but I do think it's very strong, and you can see it in the meta. I mean, Endure has been crazy. Sejuani in general has been crazy. Even the Ashe, Sejuani, Noxus deck has been pretty decent on ladder as well. But still, Reddit's perception, the community's perception, ranks Freljord the lowest of all regions.
Wow.
At 2.76. It did increase 1 full point of rating from the last month, so it did get a lot better. I think that was obvious, but still the lowest,
But like I said, I understand that view because at the end of the day, like I mentioned earlier, I think Freljord is still like very lacking as a whole. I think it's just that they have a few cards that are just really, really good, and but then like the region identity itself and the synergies and stuff, they're just mediocre. I don't know. I don't feel like Freljord does much. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It doesn't have like, it's not like, I believe Shadow Isles is the example of like the best designed region in the game right now. And it goes beyond like power level. It's just a matter of how and I feel like Freljord is definitely lacking there. So
and with things getting nerfed, with Ionia and Demacia taking big hits, and PNZ even with Burn and a few other things taking big hits in the last patch, Shadow Isles actually went back up to first place, kind of like the beta days, in the perception of regional power level, and also still with thematic satisfaction. So it's like right back to beta. They're still on top.
Turns out Curse Keeper into Blighted Caretaker is pretty good.
It's neat.
But before we get too lost, last change to champions is coming with Jinx.
Yes.
But it's not Jinx actual
Casino buff, baby. Let's go.
It's the Rocket that's getting buffed. The cost is going down from 2 to 1. So I haven't personally played, I think, any Jinx in my life. So Mogwai, can you tell us about this change?
I love this. I've been really I've been playing a lot of Jinx lately. There's a deck that I really like in the game right now. It's basically Twisted Fate and Jinx. And there's so many games in which I would have been able to set up a rocket, but I couldn't because I only had 1 mana. Like, this is this buff, I'm telling you, this buff matters a lot, dude. This buff goes a long way. It's crazy. I love it. That's all I gotta say. I love it. That's my analysis. It's great.
Yep, I think it's a good time for this too, because you're not running the risk of like PNZ aggro overtaking things, because it's right off the back of the Boom Crew nerf, and you know a lot of the aggro has switched to like Nox Ionia, so this is like the perfect time to just make Jinx underrepresented feel a bit better. I love it.
I think this is kind of similar to the Darius buff. They're champions that are not bad, but they have a lower play rate than you would like. They're not, you know, being played too often.
Yeah.
They're in kind of archetypes as a whole that aren't like discard with Jinx. That's kind of her home, even though she's not going to be playing discard probably still. And Darius kind of with an overwhelm Noxus idea. And both getting buffs, I think, yeah, it's small, but it's something, you know, and they can see how the players react to these buffs if it gets a higher play rate, if it doesn't, and then they can adjust accordingly. But a small thing that might you know, yeah, make an effect for sure. That's all for champions. So that's all the champions. Freljord, Swim was hinting at the beginning, but yeah, a big boost, and already he can, you know, Swim considers it one of the strongest regions, so we'll see what happens. This month there are still a few nerfs to cover, so we'll see. But finally going to spells and followers. First on the list is Genevieve Heart, I guess is the English translation. But her change, Heart. She goes from, I mean, people know what I'm talking about when I say Genevieve. From 4 power to 5 power, and from 4 power to 5 health. So overall, much more resilient. She is a 6-drop.
Yes.
Yeah, I have to. I'm looking up this card right now.
And I think in general,
he's got you, fam.
The explanation basically goes into them wanting it to be
Elmheart.
Elmheart. That's it, not Oakheart. Okay. But yeah, just general thoughts on this change. It's obviously again just a stat buff, but a pretty big one at that.
Genevieve Elmheart came off, like, when the patch came out, people were experimenting her. She looks really strong. For those of you guys who don't know, because like I didn't really remember. She's 6 mana, and now she's going to be a 5/5 with both Scout and Challenger. And when she's summoned, other allies you have are +1/+1 this round, which is pretty sweet. There's one fundamental flaw with this card, which is she's fighting for Cytheria on turn 6.
Exactly.
And like, if it wasn't for that, this card would be great, but
yeah, how
can you compete with Cytheria the Bold? It is impossible.
Yeah, but I did like Genevieve a lot, and I made a pretty fun deck built around Quinn and Zed with hand buff, like just a Green Glade Elder deck, and in that deck, just focusing so much on like rally and scouts. She definitely put in the massive work there, because I ran a lot of units that spawn 2 copies. Like I ran the Highway Navigator, you guys saw, no, it was Navari
Highwayman?
Navari Highwayman, there we go, sorry. And also the 4 mana 2/1 Challenger that spawns itself, like I believe it was the birds, yeah. Yeah, so basically, the deck had a very good time, like easy time, like spreading out, so giving you a developed board state to capitalize on the Bannerman-like effect from Genevieve, and she felt really, really neat in that deck. Would Cynthia have been better? Maybe. Okay, whatever. Regardless, her being a 5/5, like, Scout and Challenger are 2 keywords that when they go together, that's just really good, man. Like, you have a unit that can pick off 2 units potentially in a turn, right? So, this is a significant buff. Like, we're not talking just one stat here. We're talking 2, man. Like, from a 4/4 to a 5/5, there's such a plethora of things that this thing just trades well into now. And I definitely think, you know, I don't want to say she's gonna, you know, give Cytheria competition, but I think in certain decks she might.
Yeah.
And the dev explanation as well goes into that and says, you know, basically saying there's certain cards in its kind of range that just smash it, and they want to try and make her a bit more competitive and try and find slot in some decks. And yeah, they don't mention Cytheria, but they're clearly talking about Cytheria. And another card for Demacia, the next card is Unyielding Spirit.
Yes.
Finally does see a nerf. And the nerf is a pretty big one in terms of how the card functions, because all of a sudden it has a lot of counterability. It goes from burst speed to fast speed. Everything else is the same.
Yes.
Huge change.
Literally unplayable and good riddance.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's basically it. I'm not sad in the slightest. That card can burn in hell.
I think it's still something that a lot of players are going to like. If you're doing kind of like a sort of meme deck, you can still play a deck with like kind of Unyielding Fiora or kind of Unyielding Heimerdinger, that kind of thing. It won't be like the most bad thing ever, but it's probably not going to be competitive anymore.
And it just adds a lot more interactivity with the card itself. Before, the only interactivity was like, does my opponent have 8 mana available or not, and kind of playing the bluffing game. But that's it, because once they committed to it, it's burst speed. You can't do anything about it. But now you can do everything about it. You can do vengeance. You can if it's a weak health target, you can do grasp. There's so many ways to interact with the card now and make your opponent waste 8 mana that it's, I think, like Swim said, I think it's just a very memey card now and super high risk, because if it gets interacted with and countered, you just lost 8 mana, and that's a really big deal. So yeah, I agree. I think pretty unplayable.
I want to clarify though. I'm generally, the majority of the time, not happy to see a card just deemed completely unviable. That's one of the things that I liked. I like a lot about the live design team from Legends of Runeterra. Like, not gonna point fingers, but compared to other card games, I feel like they drama. They do a better job at not going overboard with buffs or nerfs, right? They're more, and I do like their philosophy of, like, in a perfect world, we want all of our cards to find a home. That's never gonna happen. There's always gonna be bad cards, right? But they're doing a really good job at keeping most cards playable, and I think the metagame that we have right now is a testament to that. The thing is, I believe this card was a design mistake. I believe this card should not have been designed. I believe this card should not exist. And if you're going to give me the choice of like having this card exist or just be completely unviable, I will take the unviable ticket every single time. So I do make an exception for this card. I just don't want this card to be viable. And yeah, if it can't be deleted or reworked, then at least don't make it playable. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you just said here, Mogwai. It's like, for the most part, deletion is never really the answer. Nerfing into unviability is always going to be a better answer. Yeah. And, maybe there will be some kind of deck in the future. This card is like really bad now. It's like, it still will be something people will be able to meme around with. But yeah, in terms of like winning games, you do not want this card in your deck. And for this design, that is the best. As much as I love like alternate strategies and alternate game plans, the way this card affects like games is just too unhealthy.
Yeah.
And it is still a strong effect, but the fact that it can be countered makes it entirely unreliable and inconsistent, so it cannot see competitive play, because from a numbers perspective, you're just not gonna, you're not get the effect you need from an 8 mana card as often as you'd like. But it will still be frustrating in some games. Some random dude is gonna decide to play this in his deck when you don't have any answers, and you're gonna get pissed. But it is going to be played a lot less, and it will be, I think, much more of like a meme category, which is honestly fine for a card like this. It's so polarizing. Moving on, the next card, I do not know the full name in English, but it's the Basilisk Rider. Rider? Okay.
Jinete de Basiliscos.
Okay,
can you say that? Can you say that? So?
Jinete Basilisku.
Perfect.
How did I do?
Fantastic.
Native accent right there.
God damn.
I've learned a lot since last time.
Yeah, we can tell.
We'll ask you 5 years from now, why do you learn Spanish? So I'm like, I had to read the patch notes in Spanish. So I had to do it. The change is from 2 health to 3 health. And basically the reasoning is they want, obviously this card was really never played. Allegiance was never really played for in Noxus. And they're trying to move towards that archetype and kind of, that idea, that strategy a bit more. Again, I don't think this change will do much but it's a small thing, no?
I'm gonna let you lead on this one, because I don't know what to say.
I don't think it's gonna do much. So when it flips off the Allegiance, it will be a 6/4, which is pretty nice. The biggest problem with this card is kind of basically that it's been a really bad version of crowd favorite, and at this point in time, like even that style of aggro just isn't really seeing play very much. The idea of like an all Nox aggro just isn't really great. There's just not enough reason to be in that many Nox cards. So
I just think that this card was already so far behind every other Allegiance card in the game that one stat buff is not going to cut it. And that's basically all I have to say. I think this card will remain in obscurity. And, some people will know it exists and a lot of people will not.
Yeah. But one of the things about like pure aggro as an archetype is that you really have a limited selection of cards that are going to be good enough and fast enough to meet your demands, right? And just the identity of a concept like that really doesn't mesh well with the idea of an allegiance. Like, it's going to be so hard to find 40 cards in Noxus, not necessarily 40, but 35 plus, that can actually fulfill that specific of a game plan. So it's really hard for allegiance and aggro to fit together.
Yeah, that's definitely like, because the other archetypes are not as, you have the Yordle Grifter, you have obviously the Demacia, the Vanguard Bannerman. Is it the Vanguard Bannerman or?
Yeah.
Okay, I never played that card, so I wasn't sure. Yeah, going just full Smork with all Noxus cards, even though Noxus is technically the Smorky region, is actually a hard thing to do. And honestly, like, even if it were possible, it wouldn't really be. It would just be a very vanilla sort of like strategy. It wouldn't be particularly exciting. So it's just it shares. Unfortunately, it has the burden of being both the worst and the most boring of the Allegiance cards. So it's just, it's a cool concept. Like I like the Basilisk and the Rider thing. But
I'm gonna start believing that Swim can actually read Spanish, because the actual paragraph from the devs explaining the chain kind of goes into that as well. It mentions that a lot of the aggro strategies in Noxus are very low cost, and then they switch to burn, obviously. So PNZ, for example, to finish off games, and not dipping into like the very big overwhelm units and the bigger units in Noxus, instead just opting out of the region altogether into the late game. So this is kind of giving you, obviously it's a very small reason to dip into Noxus more, but it's a start, I guess. That's what they're going for. And the next card that we're going to talk about is also maybe another reason. Captain Farron has changed from before you to transform all the cards in your hand to decimates. And now, when he's summoned, he creates 3 decimates in the hand. So it's a pretty massive change.
Yeah,
it's crazy how he actually plays.
It's such a big buff. It's like an insanely big buff, and yet I don't know if it'll matter.
It's 8 mana. It's 8 mana, and unfortunately, like, it's coming in. It's giving you awesome value, because like you could also like a card that it's like basically Chump Wump on steroids in a way, right? And it can. There's a lot of cool things that you can do with this like crazy card advantages. The card, you don't have to play these decimates. You can just like rummage them. You can do all these fancy things, right? But it's 8 mana. It's an 8 mana play, and in your 8 mana plays, you want your unit to do something immediately as it comes in, right? And he doesn't. So I mean, he's an 8/8 with Overwhelm, right? But there's also like a 6 mana 20/20 with Overwhelm. So I just don't know how relevant that is in the grand scheme of things. So like Swim said, huge buff, but yeah, I also have a hard time seeing this being ultimately relevant. Like I will say though. I did face, believe it or not, guys, I faced a Captain Farron the other day in ladder.
Ranked?
Yeah, it happened. And I was scared for a second until I realized that my opponent's entire hand was decimate, so there was like no actual potential counterplay to what I was doing anymore. Like I had like, all of a sudden I had like the greenest of lights ahead of me, and I just could do anything I wanted. And then I won, because I didn't have to fear anything. And definitely now, like I'm thinking about that specific game in which, Captain Farron came down. And if this version of it came down, I would have been really worried, Because all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm on the clock, and he still has the rest of his hand, which I don't know what it is, right? So I'll mess around with him, personally. I think there could be some potential, but he is very slow. There's no denying that.
It will be
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Panda.
Go ahead, Swim.
Oh, God. Okay, fine. He'll definitely see experimentation in like slow Noxus decks, like Swain kind of things, or maybe like Noxus Shadow Isles has seen some control attempts Like, you could try him in those, and he will almost be good, I think.
That's promising.
I think he'll be good. Definitely in Expeditions. He'll be like a crazy bomb, I think, to finish games in Expeditions.
Yeah,
for sure.
that could be.
And yeah, I think also what Swim mentioned earlier, the meta is a lot more like mid-range, like fast mid-range now compared to the patch before. If this was a slower meta with more control decks, and I think it wouldn't be a tier 1 deck, obviously, but you could do some kind of Shadow Isles, Noxus, like control, like late game kind of, because this is a lot of damage. I mean, he has Overwhelm as well, and he's a pretty big body, you know? So once he comes down, turn 8, and then you can Ledros in combo with it as well. Like, you can do certain things, you know?
I like how he just puts you on the clock. I do like that about him. Yeah. So if you can have a solid game, like, the thing is, like, if you mix Noxus with Shadow Isles, you can have good resilience against faster, aggressive decks, and this could be... We could be downplaying this as a legitimate win condition for specific decks. Like I'm open to that idea personally.
In a slower meta with some sort of like
Shadow Isles can slow anything though. Shadow Isles can effectively slow anything down, I think.
Like a Swain, Thresh, Rekindler, Farron, Ledros, like huge late game deck.
That deck sounds badass as hell. Okay, I'll definitely try something like that. It'll be fun at least.
All right, that's it for Captain Farron, though. That's his 5 minutes in the spotlight. And we'll all forget about him for another 7 months. The next card is Aurora Borealis is the English name, right?
Yeah. You got it.
And the change, it goes from 7 to 6 mana. So again, a big mana gap to, from 7 to 6 is normally pretty big, but I mean,
yeah, but what?
It's Aurora Borealis,
it is a significant buff though. Like again, we cannot downplay this. And what I also really like about this is it still levels up Lux, because I personally really like the idea of Lux with Poros and Aurora Borealis, because Aurora Borealis is such a strong value play, but the problem is the absolute sacrifice of tempo, right? So you can mitigate that with a unit like Lux. It costing 1 mana less can definitely go a long way. Will this, skyrocket Poros into ultimate viability? I doubt it, but it'll definitely make them better.
Yeah. I mean, it's a draw 4, kind of. It's just like the cards you draw are really useless. Maybe you just need to double rummage after this.
Dude, the stacks stack up. Like, they can... The thing is, you still gotta like win the game by playing Poros on the board and attacking with them, right? Like you need. Yeah. That's why I think mixing it with the Damas is important, because I think you need to also like combine this with like Relentless Pursuit. You need to be able to actually make use of your beefed up board state with like little guys, right? But I love it. I think it's definitely good. I mean, obviously.
Talking about Poros, there is another Poro change. This time to Poro Herder. And he changes quite drastically. His cost gets reduced from 4 to 2 mana. His power gets reduced from 3 to 2, and his health gets reduced from 4 to 3. So now he's a 2/3 that costs 2 mana. His old text used to be when summoned, you draw 2 Poros if you have an allied Poro on the board. New text is only 1 Poro. So pretty much they half his cost, his ability, and he's a 2/3 now instead of a 3/4.
But you still need to have a Poro on the board?
Yes, you still need to have an allied Poro.
I can't actually read Spanish. This one's interesting. I mean, honestly, I could even see this potentially being a nerf. Like, the draw 2 was pretty important, and a 4/3/4 stat line was nice. The one thing that does make this a bit better is now, Poro decks, State of Freljord, Braum is 4 mana now, right? So at 4, it was competing with Braum, and that would have been a bit awkward.
Yeah. I mean, not much to say about the stat line. Pretty the premier stat line for a 2-drop. Like, if you want a 2-drop to be good nowadays, it's either a 2/3 or a 3/2, right? And 2/3 is definitely in a very good place right now. It's just, the thing is, it's drawing you a Poro, and it requires you to have a turn 1 Poro, which may force you to run 6 Poro 1-drops, which I don't even know if that's what you want, even in a Poro deck. Like, you always want Lonely Poro, right? But a lot of times you don't really want to go full in on the second one. There'd be if you don't have like a full set, and even if you do have 6, there's gonna be a lot of games in which this guy on curve will not draw you a card, and then it's just a vanilla 2-mana 2/3. So nothing particularly exciting. I do definitely agree that the 3/4 stat line was very underappreciated. It's a fantastic stat line, and like the draw to effect was really neat. Like it actually, this card in my opinion was one of the reasons to play Poros, because it would give you really good card advantage, and yeah, now it's just kind of like more predictable, I guess, like less crazy. And I don't know, honestly, if it'll be any good. But if I am playing a Poro deck, I will be playing this guy. You know, the buffest 7-year-old man I've ever seen. Like I can't get over that arm. Like, have you seen his arm? Like,
he's trapped.
Yeah, dude, holy crap. But yeah, that's the highlight for him, unfortunately, his arm. Everything about him else is a little bit dull, but whatever.
I wonder if his power went down, so maybe his arm is like a bit smaller now.
Yeah,
as well?
That would suck. That would suck.
I would be really impressed if that were to happen. That would be the attention to detail to the next level. That being said, the small upside is that now with Braum's new ability, there is kind of a higher chance of having a Poro on the board because of the
but turn 2, I mean, exactly. Like on curve, like right?
The problem is, it's like if this card could be played outside of like full Poro, then that'd be okay. It would be like an upside, but because you're playing a full Poro, you're playing like the 1-mana Poros anyway, so you're playing on curve. So yeah, it's not that big of a deal, but just a small thing to keep in mind. There's a higher chance of having a Poro on the board with Braum's new ability. Moving on.
Wait, one last thing.
Not moving on. Go ahead.
I will actually say, like, real talk, now that Braum is really good and he does give you the free Poro, it's actually not like inconceivable. Like, I don't think this is going to be good, but it's not actually like that far-fetched to be running like a value Freljord deck and chuck like lonely Poro snacks and Poro.
Yeah. I was completely thinking that. Like, I think Poro snacks is legit now.
Right.
I think Poro, it's a good card, man. It's like, it's 3 mana and it's plus, like, it's a big buff. All of a sudden, like, you play that alongside Braum and now you're generating 4/4s. Like, and you play another one, they stack. Like, I think it's legit. And goddamn, I think Aurora Borealis is also legit too. Now, maybe not, but
you've lost me on that one.
Well,
you guys lost me at the start. That the playing I was already gone.
You gotta believe, man.
Well, when you show me the stats and the win rates, I'll believe. Moving on with Freljord, we have more nerfs and buffs. First off, we have the Wander.
Yeah,
correct?
They who wander.
They who wander. Okay. Yeah. The
Los resilientes.
It got added a new keyword, which is regeneration.
Oh no, yeah, I was reading the wrong one. Sorry. La caminante. This is.
No, they nerfed Los Resilientes.
Wait. Suim, we're not there yet.
Yeah. Well, okay, sorry.
So They Who Wander is a very interesting card.
I honestly, I don't think there's much to say about this one. Like, it's back to not completely back to what it was in the pre-beta. Like, the pre-beta, I believe it would obliterate champions as well. It's still limited to followers, and I think that's the big thing that the card will never be able to recover from unless it gets that again. Regeneration, I mean, yeah, it's just hard to see it being relevant, honestly. It never truly was relevant, and I just don't think this is gonna change anything. But you know, that's just my take.
Yeah, I mean, even with Overwhelm, it's still like, you know, it's a 10-mana card. I could maybe see trying to experiment with it if it had Overwhelm, but yeah, Regen is just doing nothing here. This is like, I think this is actually doing less than the Darius buff for sure, which is kind of crazy
and sad. So we can move on to Los Resilientes,
a card that has been in the meta.
It definitely has.
Very much in the meta in the past month. Probably maybe one of the highest play rate cards in general, with Endure being the deck by far with the biggest play rate in this last patch. They Who Endure is the card we're talking about here.
Translation.
The viewers are like, what the hell are these guys talking about? The cost, it gets nerfed from 6 mana to 7 mana. So a constant theme in this patch, 7 to 6, 6 to 7. The same way that 7 to 6 was very good, 6 to 7 is a big deal. It's a big change, especially in combo with Atrocity. Another big. You kind of can't do it, in one turn anymore. Before you used to be able to do 6 and 6.
Well, you can still do it, but you needed full mana.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a pretty big nerf. Overall, it comes down to like the support cards, right? Because They Who Endure is a card that really feeds off of its support cards. The Keeper and the Caretaker and everything else about it. I think this nerf is fine. It's gonna be a really big nerf. Like, this is pretty huge. I don't expect this card to actually see too much play, but
really?
If all those other support cards remain untouched, then this card can stay for sure.
Yeah, because I'm actually, it is unprecedented, but I am going to disagree. I think first of all, I think this was a very much needed nerf. I think we've all had these games against Tempo Endure or variants of Shadow Owl's Callista Endure, in which it seems like a pretty even match. There's some early swings with the momentum, the Blighted Caretaker onto the Curse Keeper. You build back the board state, you're trying to combat Callista, and it's really intense. And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, a 2020 with Overwhelm. Okay, yeah, I guess the game is over, right? And I feel like this card, being able to, definitely seeing this card on curve on turn 6, the deck is super easily able to generate the amount of deaths to make this a considerable threat every single time. I regularly see this go down on curve being a 10-10 or an 11-11, right? Big nerf, without a doubt, massive nerf that I believe it really, really needed. This card was always very strong. This card was always above the standard power level. The issue was before Rising Tides, it did not have as much support. It still was a strong deck, but it wasn't as ridiculous as it was now. Like, Blighted Caretaker definitely made a massive impact and is one of the strongest support cards for They Who Endure. But regardless, I believe at 7 mana, it comes down one turn later. I think this card is still going to be top tier. I think this card is still going to come down, and I think you can still technically enable the Atrocity combo in the same turn. Like, you're not limited, even though you need maximum mana, obviously. But I feel like there's a lot of games in which, They Who Endure comes later, like turn 8 or something, and it still is just such a force to be reckoned with. So I don't think this... It'll definitely affect its overall win rate and such, but I don't think this knocks it out of the race by any means.
Yeah.
I'm going to go straight down the middle. I think I agree with Swim in terms of it does need its support, and if we're not done with the patch notes yet.
We have no idea.
Swim was trying to create suspense for the viewers. He was trying to say, maybe this happened, maybe this doesn't, but we'll look at the support cards and see if they got changed as well, because if they did, and if enough of them got changed in a drastic way, then all of a sudden this card's looking a lot worse. But on paper, if this is the only change, then I think, of course, it still sees a lot of play, and Endur's still a great deck. But we'll get there when we get there.
I'm just happy we got to disagree, because I remember a comment in the last episode like, oh, you guys agree every time. So now we don't. We got some drama.
I think it'll still be competitive. I just don't see this remaining top tier. That's all.
We're gonna look at some more epic cards. I mean, I haven't mentioned it, in an obvious way, but all these past few cards have all been epic, and kind of this was the whole focus of the patch. The next one is Ren Shadowblade, a card that many viewers may not know, and that it's totally fine. What it does is when your opponent plays a follower, it automatically gets granted Ephemeral.
That's what it used to do.
That's what it used to do.
Yeah.
Now, the cost was changed from 8 mana, very high amount of mana, unplayable almost, to 4. The power was changed from 6 to 3, and the health total was changed from 4 to 3. So the mana cost and the power get halved, and the health total goes from 4 to 3. The old text, like we said, opponent summons a follower, it gets Ephemeral immediately. The new text, it has quick attack, and every time that it strikes,
strike.
it creates 1 evil shadow in hand.
Shadow Fiend.
Shadow Fiend.
Thank you. I was a test. I was just purely a test. I knew it, but I was gonna see if you guys knew it as well. Shadow Fiend is the card that I'm talking about. You guys both passed. So entirely huge changes. I mean, it's a complete rework.
Yeah, complete new card.
Bots.
Very exciting. Like I'm always like, a redesign in a way is like we're getting a new card, right? We're not losing anything because nobody was playing this. So now we have a new toy. A 4-mana 3/3 with quick attack and strike. I like the strike because you can combine this with like single combat, whirling death. You know, there's a lot of ways to enable strike beyond just purely combat. But it has quick attack, which means that you're gonna be happy attacking with this, even though it is a little bit understated for its cost. But it's got a really neat ability. I think this is a good way to try to push some ephemeral synergy. Being able to generate Shadow Fiends upon striking is neat. Ultimately, though, how viable is this going to be? Are ephemeral decks truly going to benefit from this card? I'm skeptical. Honestly,
Yeah.
I'm skeptical. I want to like this card. All right, like this is the problem. I'm conflicted because I really want to like anything that supports the ephemeral archetype, which is an archetype that I'm really fond of. Is something that I welcome. But it's hard to get excited about this card because my initial impression is just that it's lacking a little bit of everything. You know, like a little bit in stats. And also it's like, yeah, you're creating Shadow Fiends every time you're striking, but what are you gonna do with them? You know, like maybe enable. I don't know. It's a weird card. It's hard to evaluate, but it's just not very impressive.
If this card is competitive, I'll shave my head. This
okay.
is like, okay.
Hey, you said it. It's close.
Yeah.
Quoted, yeah. Okay.
No. I'm fine with that. I'll do it. But it's just like I can say this is better than the older version of the card. They did make it better, but not by actually.
That wasn't too hard though. Like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Old. Like, in case you guys don't know, like old Ren Shadowblade. If you're curious about its power level. Absolute garbage. Perhaps one of the worst cards in the game.
I would say the worst. I would actually. I think I would go that far.
You could debate that.
Yeah. But now it's like, yeah. So, okay, it still dies to 3 things. On turn 4, you're actually often not comfortable attacking with the quick attack 3/3. It's like these are the turns where the opponent might actually be like, playing bigger things.
You need to pair it with like combat tricks. And if you're adding this onto like Shadow Isles, what combat like are you going with like Mark of the Isles? Because I agree. Like a 3/3 attacking on turn 4, especially with Braum being around now. Like, So, sorry for interrupting, but I think
No, it's totally fine. But then, you've got situations where it just dies to like a random grasp or get excited, who knows. Thermo Beam. And then kind of like on top of all that, once you get through all of that, then you're like, okay, what's the payoff? I'm going to draw 1, maybe 2 Shadow Fiends, a card that's not really in the deck to begin with. It's just like, this is still just a really, really confused card.
It sucks, doesn't it? Oh, it sucks.
There's one thing about this card, which is that there is this concept of a deck which is like an all-in challenger quick attack deck, which if there are a few more quick attacks or things that give challenger, you could build a deck that's kind of built around just reliably combining those
or maybe with vulnerable as well from Bilgewater.
Yeah, with vulnerable as well.
Because I love vulnerable with like Draven or Katarina, stuff like that. Like I love that. Yeah.
And Ionia has actually been kind of close to that because Ionia actually has a lot of valuable quick attack units like Yasuo and Blade Twirler. And now with Sonic Wave, like when you combine like a deck like this where you're always going to have a quick attack unit for Sonic Wave, there's like some cute concepts. Don't do this. This is bad. But like that's one saving grace. I can look at this card and be like, well, it's another quick attack for the quick attack deck. I don't know.
That's sad though. That's sad. Like if you told me like a Ren Shadowblade rework happened, I would. It's so exciting, man. Like I'm sad. That's all I gotta say.
I think it does give some ephemeral synergy, but what it gives is just not enough because the one thing it does kind of give is more consistency of like if you're playing Shark Chariots, pulling them out, like you're gonna have an ephemeral unit because this creates them basically. But because it's turn 4 and you have turn 5 Hecarim anyway, it's kind of like it just doesn't find its place. I think. yeah, it's just like Swim said. I think it's an awkward card and it doesn't do it like what Ephemeral needs is more like consistent support in their strategy and what they want to achieve, and trying to find more consistent ways of achieving that. And this card just is like more like gimmicky. I think it doesn't really add consistency to the strategy. So it's a rework that I think just doesn't really do much for Ephemeral, and I think it won't really change Ephemeral's place in the meta at all, really.
Yeah.
And the last of the, I think the last epic card maybe, or another big epic card, J Medarda.
Yes.
Goes down from 8 mana to 6 mana, and instead of being a 6/6, it is now a 4/4. And when it is targeted, you draw one. Was the old text.
Yeah.
The new text is now when I'm targeted as a target, I guess, and I survive, draw one.
Yeah, I absolutely love this change. Unlike Ren Shadowblade, this is a card that I'm particularly very excited for. Not implying that, not because of like its potential power level or anything. Like we'll have to see. But I'm a big fan of the Piltover mid-range sort of archetype that Raptor designed back in the core set. I think there's a lot of potential to that, and I really, really like the idea of building a deck with J Medarda as a potential value win condition, alongside a Draven Splash and the Allegiance 4-drop from Piltover. There's a lot of neat ways to just generate these like 0 mana spells that can be applied onto your own units, and J Medarda sounds super fun with Axis, man. Just giving him Axis drawing cards, giving him the Sumpworks map that you get for 0 mana, or even just playing your own maps and stuff. Combining him with Whirling Death as well. Anything that targets him, even like single combat as well. Like if you want to combine him with other regions, I think it's a very, very strong, or instead of strong, I'm gonna say very promising value engine. Yeah. And there's a lot of really cool decks that you can build with this as a late game foundation, and I'm very excited. He sounds super fun to mess around with, and to build around. And one of the cards that I'm most excited about through all these reworks, basically, him and Braum are particularly really caught my attention, and I really am excited to try him out.
Yeah, his effect didn't change, right? They just kind of reworded
it.
They
just
reworded.
Yeah.
He's pretty good. Like, this is actually a really significant buff. You can build this card in so many ways.
Yeah.
Like, it's conceivable to put it in like some Demacia core decks. They do a lot of self-targeting with like their barriers and the single combats, like you mentioned. Totally splash it into like, Demacia, Heimerdinger, like Demacia PNZ, whatever.
Yeah.
You can put it in like an Allegiance style Kinko Elusives deck. Those decks have experimented splashing PNZ in the past for stuff like Teemo instead of like Omenhawk. It's not that bad. And now this is a tool that deck can use. You can totally, just feed off of some of your targeting, like Twin Disciplines or some of the other.
Or you could use the you mentioned this card earlier, the
Sonic Wave.
The Sonic Wave, and you apply it twice onto him and you draw twice.
Exactly.
That's beautiful, dude. That's oh my god, that's I didn't even think about that. That's
so great. and yeah, like you said, like the Draven style of deck, there's just like there's so many ways to use this now. And like when you think about it, it's just like a lot of people will look at the effect and just be like, wow, it's solid. But the biggest thing about this is that even without the effect, it's not that bad. 6 mana 4/4 elusive is kind of like
but he doesn't have elusive anymore. He loses elusive.
All right, I missed that one. God, if only I read Spanish.
No, they don't mention it in the thing, but he loses elusive.
Okay, I didn't know that either. That changes things.
Panda was preparing a whole thing.
I didn't know either. I didn't know.
I still think it's definitely a hit, but I understand because you want to give this guy map, right? That's one of the thematic plays onto him, giving the Sumpworks map. And it doesn't really make sense if he already has elusive, so I think that's the reasoning behind it. But I still think it's a great card even when it loses that.
I think the most exciting thing that this rework, unlike Ren Shadowblade's rework is it makes things super exciting in terms of you can build a deck around him. You can do things that you're not currently doing in the deck building process in the game right now. And when this card gets introduced, all of a sudden you have this completely new possibilities being opened up. They might be good, they might be bad, but having one card's rework changing your play. What's the word? I'm not sure, but
say Spanish or
that's not gonna help either.
Okay.
Your play experience basically it changes just with one card, especially like people that love deck building and stuff. I think that's a huge, and that's just it's like a consequence of a well done rework. I think when something exciting gets added to the game, is the same card, but it's much more exciting. I think. So definitely a positive. I think.
Wow, super positive. I love it.
Yeah.
Moving forward though. For many people, also a big positive. Curse Keeper getting nerfed here, but not the Keeper himself. Instead, it is the Abomination, the 4/4 that comes from the Curse Keeper after it gets killed. The health goes down from 4 to 3. So again, we've talked about this in other episodes. The change from 4 to 3 health is
massive.
pretty massive in terms of trading.
Huge. If you told me about this like a few weeks back, I would be very much against it. Now, seeing how the metagame has evolved and how prevalent this, Shadow Owls, or these Shadow Owls archetypes revolving around Curse Keeper, Callista, and Blighted Caretaker have been, I'm okay with this. I think it's good.
I think that this is basically necessary in terms of... So Cursed Keeper is a card that has been basically like really powerful, but kind of missing some specific tools. Like, not just the Keeper himself. If they ever added, like, a good second target for Butcher, Keeper's nuts. When they add Caretaker, Keeper's nuts. It just needed... It's so powerful, the idea of a two-mana card that just creates a false body and then summons a 4/4 is just so powerful that it was just waiting to hit a big combo. I think this nerf is necessary. I like it.
I agree. I like it as well. I mean, I think it's the only way you can change Curse Keeper without changing the effect itself. And I think it's going to be pretty noticeable because like we mentioned it, from 4 to 3 health is a pretty big change. But it still allows you to have kind of that archetype in that, early game in Shadow Isles where you can, self-sacrifice and you have a target for it, and for, Chronicler of Ruin, and I mean now specifically with Endure, with Caretaker, of course. But yeah, I think it's going to be a healthy change. Drastic, but necessary, I think, and especially for the future as well. This card is going to be seeing play, if not like in every single expansion, there's just a very strong effect, and it falls into the Shadow Isle sacrifice package so well. Like, it does it perfectly. Moving on, Shadow Isles we're still here. Harrowing gets changed from 10 mana to 9 mana. So this is a card that was appeared in the open beta when it saw a lot of play. After the Rasa nerfs, it got
ninja nerfed. Like at first people, like, it wasn't really announced. I believe I believe the developers eventually admitted that they did wanna they were planning to nerf it later, but it actually went through earlier, because it used to count both you and your opponent's units. Now it only counts yours, and now they're kind of like trying to bring it back to a little bit of its former glory by reducing its cost from 10 to 9. I think this is a fantastic buff, and it has a lot of implications. The fact that it costs 9 mana now, for example, allows you to pair this with Deny backup, which was actually impossible to do before, which could be pretty relevant in Shadow Isles, Ionia-based builds. And generally speaking, I think this is a very, very significant buff, and I think this card can be a legit, a legit resource. Like, it can be really strong, and it can have quite the impact, and I'm excited for it. This is better. This is exciting. This is more exciting for the Ephemeral archetype, for example, than Ren Shadowblade.
Yeah. On that we definitely agree. I do think that, like, Harrowing has been a card in the past, so when it rezzed anything from either side, it was kind of a card that you didn't really have to run a lot of synergy with. You expected it to just be a bunch of big dudes that can just end the game. Some of them are going to help you just draw cards for free, like Chump Lump kind of stuff. And now that it only rezzes your own units, it's much more of a synergy card. You probably will want to be running this in like Hecarim style decks. It's not just like a big finisher. And I do think it'll potentially empower that kind of deck. I think that the identity of like, potentially Ionia Splash, like not all in ephemerals, nothing super silly. You don't want too many ephemerals, but Hecarim deck with Harrowing Finisher could be good.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously there is still the big counter that is deny and playing 9 mana, but it's only one region, so not a huge deal. And yeah, I think this definitely will see a bit more play. We have mentioned it though, the meta is a lot faster now, so maybe not the perfect time for this card to shine, but at some point down the line, I think it could definitely come back into the meta and see some play, especially if Ephemeral gets more support than it got in this patch. Maybe at some point, it'll finally become an archetype. Who knows?
It's an archetype. I play a lot of ephemerals. It's not tier 1, but it's an archetype. It's not terrible.
It exists.
It exists. It's not
in some worlds. In Mogwai's world, it exists.
Yeah, in Mogwai's world, it exists.
In mine, it still hasn't.
In Mogwai's world, everything is viable.
I'm with Panda.
Even Poros exist.
Yeah.
Dude, ephemerals are good. God damn it, they're not bad. Whatever.
All right, moving forward. This is a card that when I read it in Spanish, I had no idea what it was. I had to talk to Mogwai and ask him what it was. Dreg Dredgers, my poor little boy, gets nerfed.
Panda was not happy about this one.
From 2 power to 1 power.
What?
What has this guy ever done to anyone to get nerfed?
I know.
They're just looking through the trash, trying to survive.
I would love. Yeah, I would love to disagree with Panda on this one, but I can't. Like, I don't understand this nerf. I don't think Nautilus deserves any sort of nerf.
There was other ways to nerf deep without because this is a really big.
Does deep require a nerf? It's just a good strong deck. Like I think it's completely.
In my eyes, I think totally fine.
What do you think, Swim, about deep? Like, does it require any?
So as developer, you're put into this awkward position where you want to be kind of like nerfing by play rate, and play rate and win rate aren't necessarily the same metric.
Yeah.
So you will come into some situations where there's certain archetypes that, especially at certain ranks of the ladder, will have a really high play rate, and it can be a frustrating new player experience to be like, oh, the 3rd deep deck in a row. It doesn't really matter how good it is at that point. So deep just being an archetype that's
true.
That people like. Because people just see monsters. There's
a lot of it's just a lot of Timmies.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Timmies in card games, and deep is like the most Timmy deck I've seen in any card game ever. It's just big fish and bigger fish. Now I will admit that in my comments in my YouTube videos, whenever there's like Nautilus, I get a lot of comments from people complaining about how overpowered Nautilus is and everything. And it's actually one of the most common complaints, and it is baffling to me. But I understand, if you're what you just said makes a lot of sense, because if you're coming into the game and all of a sudden you're playing this match and then he's playing these huge ass things for no mana whatsoever, then you're like, well, that's OP, that's the first thing that comes to mind, right? And I hate to see a card or an archetype nerfed because of this, though. It just feels so uncalled for and unfair, but yeah, Nautilus does not deserve nerf. If anybody's watching this and you think Nautilus is overpowered, kindly just get good. No offense, but just please get good, because your whining is just doing more harm than anything. So I'm sorry, but
they could have nerfed it, tossing 2 instead of 3. Not a big nerf, sure, but I mean it's a nerf still, and it's still a big deal with tossing. But
do you think it's a big deal? Do you think it's I don't think it's that impactful. Do you?
Exactly, it's not. But I mean, we're seeing Darius getting buffed from 5 health to 6 health. Why don't you just take a toss off my poor Dreg Dredgers?
A little bit of bias there, Panda.
But the 2 to 1, the power nerf is huge. I mean, early game we talked about 3 to 4 being a big. I mean, the 1 to 2 gap is enormous, because turns 1 and 2 you're trying to trade this poor trash picker-upper against any other 2-drop from your opponent, when you have the weaker 3/2s, for example, and now it can't do that. So I think we might see something like Make It Rain being played a lot more in deep, and even maybe some kind of Yoink hybrid. I might try it out when the ladder resets.
Are you cutting Dreg Dredgers?
No.
Oh,
but
okay.
The power change from 2 to 1, Make It Rain, becomes a lot more viable early game for deep, because the pings are much more important because you're going to leave stuff off at 1 health, right?
Really?
I think so.
I feel like that's the opposite. There's a lot more in the meta that has 3 health than 2 health. So the Make It Rain should have like less finishing targets, I think. Because in the early game, there's actually very few things that actually have 2 health.
Could be. I haven't played, like, actually tested. I just thought in theory probably with this power nerf, especially because before it always felt like with the Thorny Toad, like blocking turn 2, you would always set up plays where there was like a lot of 1 health units, and this is kind of the same, except you have 2 1 turn like block stallers kind of. So I'm not too sure, but something I think I'll experience with and try and see.
Yeah. It is true that deep decks have had a super efficient curve against aggressive decks. You know, the turn 1 Dredger into Horny Toad into the Wanderer is a really nice 1-2-3 for like any sort of deck that's trying to kill you early. So yeah, maybe
if they wanted to nerf deep, I would have expected nerf somewhere else, you know? Maybe like a Thorny Toad going down.
But no nerf on any of those. Like, Horny Toad definitely not, because I believe he's the worst of the bunch. There's a lot of matchups in which you just ignore that thing. Like, it just doesn't exist. Yeah. I think the best one is definitely the Wanderer, but you can't really nerf the Wanderer with it making any sense, because if you make it a 2-2, then it's just a strictly worse Rejuvenator or Emerald Awakener, right?
They have the toss mechanic,
They have the
toss, which allows you to make subtle nerfs without changing the stat line. So I'm not sure why they don't. I would have personally liked to see more experimentation with nerfs to toss, like the toss mechanic. It's a very easy number to change. It will affect win rates. I mean, it's just math. It's going to happen at some point. It's not going to be a major thing, but they could have looked at maybe changing the toss value on some of the toss cards and then seeing how that affects them at the deep's play rate or win rate. But poor Dreg Dredgers get axed instead. Next card, a card that I did not know how to translate either. It is Mind Meld.
Danteo.
We're sure about this, right, Mogwai?
Yeah,
you're confirming this.
Meld,
okay,
yes.
let's not lie to the viewers. Mind Meld gets changed from 8 mana to 7 mana. Playable?
No.
Yeah, Mogwai, you were. So I heard at one point you were messing around with the Mind Meld deck, and then you cut it after like 2 games or something.
Yeah, I gave. I'm surprised at how swiftly I gave up with the entire concept. It to be fair, my chat was really adamant on me making Bubble Bear work, and I figured like if I was gonna if any sort of strategy around Bubble Bear would make sense, it would be to capitalize on his resilience and his elusive keyword, to have a body that would stick for the turn in which you play Mind Meld, and then just kind of like, But it was even worse than I was expecting, and my expectations were already very low. So yeah, I just don't think this does anything. But I don't know. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong.
I will say, Mind Meld is in a really confusing region. I don't understand why it's a Bilgewater card from like a flavor or mechanical standpoint. It just seems very strange to me.
It's not even particularly exciting to me as a meme card. Cloud Drinker is interesting to me as a meme card. Mind Meld I just don't really care. It's just a buff. It's just like a generic buff. It's just a weird, funky pack mentality. It's just eh. Yeah. And pack mentality is better. I don't know. I don't like it. Costs the same as pack mentality, and I still prefer pack mentality.
Right, because you have to play. Well, that's the thing. Like, the problem with Mind Meld is when you just look at the concept of the card, it rewards one thing, scaling off the incentivizer of an opposite thing, which is that it wants you to play a lot of spells, but then it wants you to have a lot of units. And Bilgewater actually can kind of do that, because they have spells that summon units like Double Trouble and Jailbreak.
Yeah.
But then the problem becomes like,
that you're running too many bad cards together.
Yeah. Whereas pack mentality is just simple. It's just play a lot of units. That's easy to do. It's it isn't pulling itself in 2 different directions.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. It's probably better because of that.
I think it also kind of misses the mark in terms of flavor, because when I first heard about this card and 8 mana Mind Meld, it sounds like it's gonna have a really powerful possession effect, but better maybe, or different in a way, but still that kind of out there effect. And then it's just
it's so confusing. I don't get anything about it. It's called Mind Meld. It's in Bilgewater. It buffs everything. It scales per Like nothing about it makes any sense. Bilgewater doesn't even have like a ton of spells. Like everything about this card is just, huh? I don't.
So you hit randomizer.
It's clearly made. Like it's designed, even the goofy art, like it's designed as a meme card.
Yeah.
And it's just, in my opinion, while I do feel like the design team does generally a really good job at designing cards, not every card is gonna be, a success. And I just think this is not a well-designed meme card, and that's just the reality of it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yep. I agree. Moving on, still in Bilgewater, we have a card that I also didn't know, but now I know. Petty Officer.
Mm.
A
Big
card that
buff.
I thought was
Yeah.
pretty okay in some decks. Like
okay, so Slim goes first on this one. He out.
It's a competitive mana point, but still, I think it was pretty okay as a card, and it got changed from 1 health to 2 health. Major in terms of survivability.
Yeah.
Mm.
What's the thought here with how viable it will be to play from now on?
Auto include, kind of like, I mean, okay, the word auto include might be a little like I could definitely see skipping it in some decks. So Petty Officer, it's a 3-mana 3/2 that you can choose to summon a random 1 or play a keg. I want to say there's this concept in design. The most important thing for anyone who plays video games to understand that when you're thinking about balance, different kinds of designs should be balanced at different levels. There's some kinds of concepts that are meme concepts that you want to be weak. Remember, like Unyielding Spirit, like we agreed that it was proper for that to be literally unplayable, which sounds weird because you expect things should be balanced the same, but that's not usually how it works.
Yeah.
Some kinds of concepts you actually want to be very strong. I love this buff. This card is, I think, basically auto-include, and I think this is the kind of card that makes a lot of sense for that. It's versatile. You still have the choice of being able to play it for the keg or for not a keg. It will allow the sort of keg archetype to piggyback off of this buff as well. So it empowers like a disempowered archetype. There's a lot of ways to like, it's just a great card that is super flexible, creates interesting situation, and empowers like weak things.
Going from 1 health to 2 health is pretty much as meaningful in this game as going from 3 to 4. It's just so like the amount of things that Petty Officer survives now is just massive. Like Vile Feast, Make It Rain, Withering Wail, the red card from Twisted Fate. I could go. There's so many ping effects in the game right now. Misfortune's Attack, and guess what? The Dreg Dredgers Panda also will not take him down anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, Matt, like not much more I can add to that. Honestly, fantastic buff. Outstanding card without a doubt, because one of the strongest traits, especially like when looking at a card. And I've spoken about this with Swim in the past, like when, analyzing certain cards and stuff. It's not only like the stat lines. It's just when a card has flexibility, a card provides you with more than one option. That's a very strong trait for a card to have in any card game. And this card is flexible, and it's just fantastic. It's great.
Yeah. And the reason I love this so much is that this is kind of what kegs needed. I love the keg mechanic.
I love it too. Yeah, it's my favorite thing from like Bilgewater, by the way. Like it's my favorite mechanic. Like I love kegs.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
But just like the concept of kegs being locked in and being committal is sort of flawed. Like they're always going to be weak as long as you have to play them as kegs. This is the one card that has that free flexibility, and so it's just like just by being good on its own, it just empowers kegs further, and that's great.
Yeah, like, it's not like it's not like you have that many resources to generate kegs to begin with, right? And a lot of times, Petty Officer never felt really bad. It's not the card that you would think about. This card immediately like needs a buff, compared to other cards who require one. But it's definitely really. I think it's a buff that we can all welcome, because the keg archetype doesn't really have that many like good enablers, right? You have the dread, what's it called, the 2-drop, I forgot the name,
Dreadway Casks.
The deckhand, the Dreadway deckhand, and obviously you have Gangplank. More powder has dropped in usage more and more as people have realized it's not really good, right? But having just such a nice body for this effect it's great. Like there's nothing.
Exactly.
It's just fantastic. It's not like the archetype is overrepresented or anything. And I think this is low key one of the best buffs in the patch. And
I love it.
Look forward to it.
When I mentioned earlier with the Shadowblade change, kind of Ephemeral needing kind of a support, more support in like the early game and more consistency. This is the kind of what I had in mind.
Yeah.
I think cards like Caretaker, for example, added that to the Endure list and made like the Sacrifice and Curse Keeper a lot better as well. Like there's these cards that are auto-included in the archetype that are super strong, that are super consistent, and that they're almost a reason to play the deck all of a sudden. Maybe not to that level with this change, but I think it's, going to be a key change. Like, for example, if Deep existed without Wander in its initial state, and all of a sudden a card got reworked to Wander's effect, it would make Deep super good. Because that, even though it's just a 3-drop, it still adds so much to the, it's not a sea monster, it's not, but it still does a huge amount to making the archetype playable. So I think it's a good comparison to if we see something like this in an Ephemeral archetype, like something like the consistent 3-drop that does things for the deck until you reach Hecarim and until you reach the late game, that might, change its play rate a lot. And like Swim mentioned, I think it's a really good example of a buff for Kegs.
Yeah. I want to be clear how big of a buff this is. Like this one change is like almost meta defining. Like Bilgewater is actually like significantly upgraded just because of this 1 health. Like they took a card that was already competitively being ran, they gave it like a relevant boost, and this card is actually central to Bilgewater. Like it really is. Like suddenly, even outside of like keg decks, suddenly cards like Make It Rain that were kind of like, it feels good sometimes on the fringe. Make It Rain is like there's so little downside to like comboing out there, because like there will be a very significant amount of cases where you go this into keg into Make It Rain. It feels so good when this has +1 health. Like we evaluate cards by trades. Like when you think about it, so as a 3/1, what is it? Given the fact that you're pulling a random thing, what does it trade down to? Well, you have to worry about Vile Feast, Hapless, Make It Rain, kind of anything that deals 1 damage, Static Shock.
It serves more as a blocker most of the part. Like
right.
it's just purely as a blocker. And the more you're waiting on it to block, the more likely it is your opponent's just going to easily remove it with a ping effect, right? So it's just monumental. Like this, the buff from 1 health to 2 health, again, same category as 3 to 4 health. It's so big, so big.
Like the one thing is like we have to ask ourselves, now that it has 2 health, what does this trade down to? And the answer is basically nothing. When they Mystic Shot it dies.
2/3s, yeah.
When they Mystic Shot it dies, but you still have the Battle Cry. You still got the 1/1 or the keg, so you're still fine there. Yeah. Maybe it trades down to like Laurent Protege, but that's how we evaluate cards, is like what it trades down to. If it doesn't trade down to like almost anything, cards nuts. Like it's so huge.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And Bilgewater was already a very good region, I think, in this last patch. I mean, especially with a Yoink package, it was seeing a lot of play rate, for example. And even in the perception, it was 3rd overall, right next to Ionia. So, I mean, and a huge gap between Bilgewater at 3rd and PNZ at 4th. So,
speaking of Yoink,
perception-wise as well.
We'll be tackling that soon.
And speaking of Bilgewater, this is, a big buff, but obviously they've been in the watch list this past month, and they will be seeing changes. We're talking about Pilfered Goods and Black Market Merchant. So the change is first to the keyword.
It's going to call it NAB.
It's going to be NAB in English, which is, kind of Yoink, but maybe a bit less of a negative connotation. They probably took a while to find out what word to choose there.
Yeah.
But okay.
I'm not going to lie. Like I didn't even know NAB was a word. Is it like an actual word in English?
So surprised, Mogwai.
Yeah.
It's a word, okay. But
it's a word.
What does it mean? Like just take something?
Just to take something.
Okay.
But with a less aggressive connotation, I think. Like more like.
Right. Just like a friendly, like, hey, I'm taking your money. It's okay.
Rob is like more like aggressive. I think Nab is like more.
Okay.
No,
yeah.
Swim.
Just
I think.
Like,
when more PG. More PG.
You're at a lunch. Your friend reaches over and nabs one of your fries. It's like,
okay.
Like it's more.
Yeah. All right. So what do you guys think? I'm not gonna lie, I've been devil's advocate for like a long time, but I reached my breaking point recently. I'm very tired of this mechanic. I've lost so many games to just absurd, like this card pulling the one ruination in my deck or just bullshit like that. That it's hard, and I've been like lurking other streamers, and they suffer from the same, like Alan Z, just or anybody like that I watch, and they like do something like this to them. Everybody gets pissed, everybody, like, and yeah, I think the community in general is very, very tired of this. And this is definitely like a very, very interesting change, right? Like now you're taking from the bottom of the deck. So no longer, it does take that one big aspect of the whole frustration package. Let's go ahead and label it like that, which is you can no longer say, oh, I was about to draw that. They denied me this card. You can no longer say that. And that's definitely a good step in the right direction, but good step in the right, a bit redundant, but yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Is it enough? How do you guys feel about this? I'm really curious to see like how you guys feel about this change.
Yeah, well, they're also taking Black Market Merchant down to 1 health. Right?
Yes,
and that's
yes.
that's it's a pretty big deal. Along with that, I think that these cards will remain competitive. I think they have to.
I mean, Pilfered Goods is still 2 mana, right? So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fine for these cards to be competitive. That being said, I will say, like, I'm in the same boat as you, Mogwai. I was thinking like a month ago, and I think I said on the podcast a month ago, I said I like Black Market Merchant and Pilfered Goods, and now
we all did.
Right, but it is too strong, right? I do think the mechanic is good. I think it should exist in the game, but it was just too strong. The cards it was on were just too cheap for what they did. And that's kind of where the big problems are, because there should be risk reward. Like,
so you think it's more of a balance issue than like an actual like design issue? Because yes. I've begun to believe that it's actually a design problem, because I just think that taking cards away from your opponent's deck at all levels of play is just inherently tremendously frustrating. And it kind of like falls into the same, not exactly the same, but a very similar basket as to the Unyielding Spirit one, because it's like it's either not viable or competitive, or it's competitive and it is just absolutely obnoxious. It's not so much about, like, right now I do agree there's definitely like a power level issue with the mechanic, right? That's why it's so popular. Like, it's very cheap, what you're saying, but I also, like, my frustration does not really come from the power level. My frustration comes from the very niche scenarios in which happen really often, to me at least, in which they just take that specific tech card in your deck and use it against you. And you're also like not able to use it yourself. I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of conflicted, because I have defended. I love the Black Market Merchant, like the character and his voice lines. I think it's hilarious, and I really like. I've liked the mechanic from a concept. Like the fact that it's very thematic as well, to Bilgewater and the whole pirate theme and everything. But I don't know, man. Sometimes I just feel like, dude, this just turns the game very Hearthstone-y, and I personally don't want that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it can be a bit much sometimes. The thing is, like, balance and design are very kind of like intertwined, right? Yeah. Like, I do agree with you that those sorts of situations shouldn't be happening. But at the same time, if the cards are made weaker, then not only will it happen less commonly, but there will be plenty of games where you'll be able to win after it happens. So it'll end up kind of like being fine, or you're going to be able to win because your opponent played it. And it's also like, when they're less overpowered, you're going to be seeing less of them. I think it ends up being something that I don't want to leave the game. But I will say, it's possible these cards are still too strong. Even though Black Market Merchant got -1 health, the feeling of, like, on turn 4, you play Merchant into double Pilfered Goods, that's kind of crazy. That's sort of insane.
I don't think this is a significant buff. Like, when it comes to the balance aspect of it, I don't think this is. I think these cards are still, and it seems like they do want to see this still seen play, and I'm just a little bit. I mean, I'm definitely very happy. Like the more so than the change to Merchant, which is it's impactful. People think the Merchant body is not relevant. It is, and having it be pinged, it will always be relevant, especially because it needs to stick on the board to get the effect. But the change to like the nab mechanic and the fact that it picks from the bottom of the deck, that's the highlight of this for me. I think that's definitely going to mitigate, and to some extent, like how much, it remains to be seen, but it will definitely mitigate frustration a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing to me, because this is really frustrating, and I know for a fact that this is the main culprit for like a lot of people like being just a lot of people just quitting the game or being frustrated, just like, screw this. I'm going home. Like, I'm not like this guy, especially like you're getting into this game and then you find this, you run into somebody who drops the merchant, Pilfered Goods, and then just starts using all of your cards, and you don't get to use them, and it's just like, the hell is this? Like it's dangerous. It's actually dangerous for the health of the game, like for the overall experience, and I'm just concerned, but I do like, I think this is at the very least a step in the right direction. I know I say that a lot, but it's definitely a good step in the right direction. I'll say for like the 40th time in this video. But it's, yeah.
I still think the distinction should have been made between, I mean, obviously there's two issues here. One, the power level of the cards themselves, they're very strong, just 2 mana, draw 2 if you meet the condition, and Plunder is quite easy to meet, I think, overall. And the frustration aspect. And sure, the drawing from the bottom helps with the frustration and the psychological aspect a bit, but only, I mean, in terms of actual, like, the Pilfered Goods itself, without counting Black Market Merchant, pretty much got better with this nerf, because against Freljord, sure, it's not as good because you're not stealing from the top, but against every other deck, you were helping them. You were, the champion draw rate that you're stealing from the top.
Yeah,
so it's a buff to Pilfered Goods by itself.
Oh,
and I think if you
look at
how
I didn't
many,
look at it that way. Yeah. This is still gonna see like so much play. It's ridiculous. Like this is going nowhere. And that's that's the thing. That's why I think it's a design problem and not a balance problem. Because I mean, yes, you can fix this with balance, but the reality is the way to fix this is the Unyielding Spirit way, and we don't want them to make Black Market Merchant and this stuff like unviable. But if you don't do that and it is viable, it's still toxic, man. It's still toxic as hell.
So what I was getting at was, you're trying to nerf either through like balance and power level, or you're trying to nerf through more psychological, more frustration oriented changes, which is, I think, most of the complaints haven't been, oh, this card is super strong for its effect. It's more along your complaints, which are, this feels unfair to play against, this feels like it's ruining my experience, whatever. And the changes that, I think are obvious are, one, not introducing this nab mechanic at all and making it a copy mechanic, which already exists in the game with Chempunk Pickpocket.
Yeah.
Or two, revealing the cards you steal, because the big part of this is the information game about knowing what card's being stolen, what card you have to play around your opponent having, what card you have to play around not having in your deck anymore. So if it's a singular win con like Atrocity, it ruins your experience of it. So they could have explored nerfing it through that way more, which isn't a direct, nerf to the card's value itself and what it achieves, but it will feel a lot better to play against, I think. Yeah. And most of the complaints have been from a frustration perspective and not a balance or a power level perspective. So I think it's an obvious solution. Obviously, Black Market Merchant is a different story. It did get nerfed, and it's still a sizable nerf. But
I've never. Sorry, I'm just very like. I have a lot of say. It's just, I'm just gonna get this off my chest and I'll shut up. But I got into like a. I posted, like, I had a terrible stream experience with Yoink. Like, I was complaining about the stream the entire day of Yoink, and then it kept happening again and again. And then the stream ended with, like, me losing to, like, I had a one game, and my opponent took my one ruination, and I lost because of that, right? Regarding the psychological aspect, it's mitigated. It's not completely solved, because what's being, like, fixed is the fact that, I wanted to play that card. But what if you don't really care about playing that card? It's just the frustrating fact that they're using a card that's in your deck that their region combination does not give them access to, and they're using it against you, right? That's still there. And that's still going to stay there. And, due to human psychology, it's just, it may only happen, like, once every 6 games against it, but you're going to remember that one game, right? And that's a big problem. I had this argument. I think Navi like tweeted at me when I said what I said, and basically I never have like anything against the. I just think I don't think the power level overall is something to talk about for the most part. Like I think that's where people get confused. Like it's very strong, but I don't think it's at a power level where it is just ridiculous, right? Like it may be a little bit overtuned, but that's not the problem with it. The problem with it lies within its core, like its design, the way it works, and just how it mentally affects the player base. And I just think it's both, you know, it's dangerous. It's just dangerous for the future of the game potentially, and I don't know how they're going to solve it, because they either have to like brutally nerf it, which is not their memo, their way to approaching things basically. It's not their thing, or just like letting it be, right? And I don't know. I'm very passionate about this sort of like mechanic lately, because it's triggered me a lot, and that's basically what I have to say. I don't know. I don't think this is a nerf at all, and we'll see just how this evolves. Maybe the nav change and everything is enough for the frustration to lie down to acceptable levels, but it's like one of the few things that's really wrong with the game right now, I think.
I will say, Mogwai, this is something that we, I think, strongly disagree on. We found that one thing.
Okay.
Now, I want to be very clear here. I think this card has existed for the past month in a very frustrating and unhealthy form, and I think that this nerf won't really significantly change that. Okay. Those are 2 points that I completely agree with you on.
All right.
However, I don't like the approach of like removing certain concepts from the game unless absolutely necessary, which was the case for Unyielding Spirit, but I actually disagree about this card. You mentioned that they don't want to brutally nerf this card, but when you look at how incredibly strong it is on like a paper level, they could brutally nerf it and it would still be viable. My suggestion, for example, would be to see a world where Black Market Merchant didn't have the effect of reducing the mana cost of things. So it would basically not help it snowball in those turns, in those wacky turns.
But what would the point of Black Market Merchant be then, right? It would just be a worse Pilfered Goods, right? Just a Pilfered
with a body.
It would have the body. Yeah, it's just a different version of the same concept, which is basically, you know, it helps potentially specific archetypes like Twisted Fate, or, you know, potentially some other synergy card in the future.
Well, what about like nerfing Pilfered Goods instead? Wouldn't you like that better? Or like, because I actually like the Black Market Merchant. I like the fact, I think it's very thematic that he like lowers the cost of the cards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think from a flavor perspective, like I think that's very important. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. No, that's fine. The balance is kind of like you can kind of tweak the numbers however you want. Right?
Okay.
I was suggesting a while ago that Black Market Merchant could only discount the first card you draw per turn or something like that.
That's it.
Oh.
And that was something that, you know, so basically that stops like the Pilfered Goods snowballs.
That's pretty elegant. Yeah, that's neat.
I guess I would say like my biggest point is that it's important to remember that a really large part of this frustration does stem from accumulation of experience, right? Like at its core, and you'll remember this because nobody minded these cards a month ago. It's just because they've accumulated so much in that last month.
I see.
So when you balance it to a point where they're not seeing play that much, when it's like once every 6 months or a year, there'll be like this crazy thing where they do steal your One of Ruination, you're able to laugh that off. And it's kind of interesting. It creates these unique situations. But just right now, it's such a toxic frequency that they're happening at. Okay. And that frequency can be taken out with balance and doesn't need to be a redesign.
But the question is like, if it's taken out with balance, to what degree are you like nerfing it? You know, because if it's still like, if for example, let's make Pilfered Goods 3 mana, it's still gonna be like, it's still gonna see a lot of play. You know, like I don't know, like I feel like this pattern and this repetition of this, you know, the toxicity that this mechanic represents, I feel like it's not gonna go away until like the cards themselves are significantly nerfed, and I just don't want that to be the answer. Basically, I think you misunderstood me earlier when I said like I don't want them to just like delete this, because like I'm very conflicted. I'm very conflicted with this mechanic, because Pilfered Goods I don't really give two craps about, to be honest, but Black Market Merchant, I love that character. I love the concept. I love the thought that went into making that card, right? And I don't want to see it go.
Right.
But what do you do?
You nerf them. Okay, so you're saying you don't want to see these cards significantly nerfed because they might not see play or something. Like, look at how OP these cards are. Black Market Merchant is a 1 mana draw 1, right? Because it discounts, it gives you 1 mana for free.
Yeah.
Pilfered Goods is a 2 mana draw 2. That's perfectly fine. And then when you combine them together, you're getting 2 free mana on top of that. The fact that Black Market Merchant is a 1 mana draw a card that turns your Pilfered Goods into a 0 mana draw 2 is ridiculous. That doesn't need to be like that. So you said it exactly right. When if they nerf Pilfered Goods to 3, they're still going to be played a lot. That's because these cards, the numbers on these cards are actually inherently ridiculous.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with it being like. I just thought that it wasn't like the most important like aspect of the problem, right? But I think we definitely can all agree it is overtuned in its current state. And maybe just finding a way to make it balanced, then it won't be as frustrating because you won't run into it as frequently and it won't happen as frequently. It's just that I'm not. Ultimately, it comes down to my vision of the game or my perspective. I don't believe Legends of Runeterra needs this level of variance induced into it. I think this card, these cards like add in a whole new layer of chaos that the game does not need, and that's kind of like because it's kind of crazy how like I've been playing this game nonstop ever since beta, the open beta happened, and I have never been so consistently frustrated with a mechanic as I have with this one. It's kind of scary what it does to me. It brings out the worst in me, man. It puts me in a shitty mood, dude. Like all of a sudden, without realizing, I'm talking back to my chat. Like I'm just like being an asshole, and
I've seen it. You go full merchant when this shit happens to you.
Just wow. Okay.
I will say, I know we've been talking about this for literally like 30 minutes, but I do want to make one final point. There's this saying
oh my god.
there's this saying, the dose makes the poison, which is to say that there's no substance or concept that is inherently unhealthy. It just comes down to the quantity, right? Like certain chemicals in the body, for example, are unhealthy at certain quantities and healthy at other quantities. At the end of the day, it is true that this game shouldn't turn into Hearthstone. You don't want that. I don't want that. Nobody wants that. But it's not necessarily a concept of design. It's a concept of how common things are and the repetition of those things. Okay. Hearthstone is Hearthstone because like these things happen like too frequently.
Yeah.
And you don't want a game that has the level of just like repetition and experience. That becomes frustrating. But when you kind of go too far in the other direction, then you end up with another similar repetition of experience. You do need some things to every once in a while mix things up.
Yeah,
and I think
we don't want to beat chess. Yeah,
I specifically think that it is integral to the concept of this card that the cards it draws you aren't revealed. I think that as much as
I can agree with
kind
that.
of would like that,
I can agree with that.
Because that's what makes it interesting. That's what makes these cool things happen.
You take out so much excitement out of it. That's
right.
As frustrating as it is. I can't deny that would definitely take a lot from it for sure.
So it just comes down to the quantity and the commonality. If this is just like it's just at toxic levels right now. That's why this has only been in our heads for the past month, even though these cards have existed for ages.
Let's see how it shapes out. And Panda's just like nodding, like, "Oh my god."
Panda's like, "Get on with it, Panda."
Enough.
I'm supposed to be the host, but sometimes I can't stop the train. The train just keeps going.
There was a lot to talk about here. This is meaty.
Luckily for us, though, and for the viewers, possibly this is the end of the patch notes. I do think we haven't discussed this before, but I think it would be nice to go over the cards that haven't been nerfed. These last like 5-10 minutes, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Especially with the survey results, it's quite easy to see cards that were deemed very problematic that just went under the radar, basically.
Okay.
Devs. So looking from the champions perspective, I don't know if you guys saw the results or not. I can quickly.
If you can link them quick, yeah. Just to have a reference.
But basically, Sejuani was the top champion by quite a bit, with a 4.20 rating. Interesting number there. But it didn't get nerfed, and I think it's maybe the only time since I've been doing these surveys where the number one champion hasn't been nerfed. We saw Karma nerf, we saw Hecarim nerf back in the day, we saw...
Wow, so Sejuani and Heimer are like really ahead of like.
And Heimer also dodged anything, so they're both above 4. And this was a survey. The results here were the results were super tightened, where there's no champion under 2. So the buff.
Kallista's lower than she should be on this list though.
And she still had a huge jump, like 0.8 is pretty massive.
But she's too low for where she definitely should be closer to those two. But yeah, I mean I think Sejuani is in a situation in which she's just a very good champion, but I don't think she requires a nerf personally. I don't think she does.
I think
Go ahead, Panda.
Go ahead, son.
Panda, I insist.
All right. I think her leveled up effect, it's obviously hard to reach it, but I think maybe having it be something more similar to Swain, where it's not an immediate everything gets, where it's more of a, because Swain's level up is like every ping of damage is 1 stun, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So having something not so drastic, I think would, but still, I don't think it's that problematic as a champion. I think it's good, and Freljord needs something that's good. Maybe now with Braum and Anivia also being very good or better, they might not. Dude,
are we in for like a Freljord meta? Oh my god.
Yes, I've been waiting to say.
This is karma.
I've been waiting to say. I think Freljord is going to be this like tier 0 almost. Like
Jesus.
Everything is setting into place. I already mentioned. I think it was one of the strongest, arguably the strongest region before this update. It hit like 4 or 5 like high tier decks.
I just still think you can't label it like that though. Like I still think that it's just a few cards. Like the entire region still kind of sucks, man. Like I don't know. Like I see like it's just like Elixir of Iron, not even Elixir of Iron, just Omen Hawk, Fear of the North. So it doesn't feel like, because like for example like the Plunder mid range deck. How many Freljord cards does that deck even run? It just runs Sejuani, Omen Hawk, and Fear of the North. The rest is just Rosewater, right?
If you're saying that, Mogwai, is that not the same exact situation as PNZ has been for several months, where it's had very strong champions,
perhaps.
very strong key removal cards, and the rest of the region sucked.
Well,
I mean,
not exactly. Like they have
most of PNZ does suck. Like
really sucks.
They have Mystic Shot, Philosopher.
Okay.
Okay.
So champions and removal. That's it.
So the thing is, so Mogwai, I do completely agree that there is a fundamental flaw in like linear power rankings. There's a lot these things leave out, and your point is one of those things. But I don't think that detracts from being able to say like
okay. I will admit that. Yeah.
It's just insane. Everything is falling into place. Other things are getting nerfed. The Braum buff is absolutely massive. You've got cards like Omen Hawk and even Avaros and Trapper. Dude, now that Nab takes from the bottom, these cards are just gonna dominate. Omen Hawk into buffing Braum, slap on 4 is the new thing. That will happen. Yeah. Like so often.
Yeah. Like look at the bottom 3, Jinx, Anivia, and Braum. And all of them got buffed. That's beautiful.
Right.
Braum is going from the bottom bitch to like king, man. It's gonna be crazy. Oh my god. Yeah.
Freljord it's actually gonna be kind of toxic. I think pretty fast.
Yeah, it's the cool kid faction now. We were laughing, like we were literally like laughing at Freljord the last podcast, and now it's just like it's gone full circle.
I wasn't laughing.
You were laughing more than anybody.
I was chuckling.
Yeah.
Was that the last one? I was laughing about it 2 podcasts ago.
Okay, but you were the most vocal again. Oh, Freljord, Omega lol.
But that was before the last patch.
Okay. All right. You were laughing.
And I think that's it for like relevant information from the champion ratings. I think everything else is pretty much not too crazy. Looking at the problematic cards, we had 6 cards above 4.0, which is generally the range where cards get nerfed. And all of them got nerfed except for 1, Flash of Brilliance. This is a card that I've been talking about.
It's not happening.
It's not going to happen, I know. But I was very surprised to see them rated a 4.20 when this card has been the same for like a ton of patches, and I've been complaining about it to some extent.
It's just the prevalence of Heimerdinger,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But still, pretty surprising. And Will of Ionia finally does break into the 4.0 range.
I continue to say it will eventually become 5 mana. It's a matter of time.
Yeah. I will say
the
Will of Ionia is the one thing that will stand in the way of this Braum Sejuani meta.
Ionia is going to be the savior.
I am very afraid of this meta. I think tier 1 is going to be literally Freljord, and then Ionia counters to Freljord. Like, this... Oh, man. I don't see how you can be tier 1 in this next meta without being either Freljord or Ionia.
But you know, yeah.
Like,
I'm trying.
There's just there's nothing. Like,
yeah, it's right now I got nothing. I need to. I'm gonna obviously, like, you know, I'm gonna wait to see how things pan out. But right now I have no counter argument to that. Like, it's looking really strong.
And access to Kindly Tavern Keeper means it's gonna be hard to, like, counter them with aggro too. It's like you are Freljord or you are Ionia.
Yeah. It'll be interesting.
And as for other cards that did not get nerfed, Caretaker, I think, pretty strong card. Did break into the top ratings for the problematic cards. Did not get any kind of nerf. We'll see if the nerf's a Curse Keeper, and they who endures enough. But yeah, we'll see. I think that's everything relevant we can talk about from the survey. Obviously, just a very clear reflection of the meta the past month. We see a lot of cards that are in They Who Endure, and like Mogwai said with the Heimer deck / the Brilliance, and Black Market Merchant with the Pilfered and the Yoink deck. So pretty not very surprising results here, I think.
Yeah.
Aside from like the Sejuani jump and yeah, basically just that, I think. But yeah, I think that's the end of everything we have to talk about today.
We managed to keep it under 2 hours, so good for us. But we still went overboard. It's fine. I think we spent like 30 minutes talking about nab and nabbing stuff. But yeah, I'm very excited for this meta. Like, I think we have a fantastic metagame right now, and I can't help but be excited for Braum and all the new toys. But okay, I see you swim. I know it's scary.
I don't want to be the negative Nancy here. I really don't. I will say, Mogwai, I agree with you. I love the dev team. They're really heads up about some stuff. They catch on to things like before a lot of the player base does. They're really smart. I love, like, playing the game. Like, it's rare because normally I hate dev teams. I will say, there's a few of their patches that I felt pretty uneasy about, and this is definitely one of them. I think that this Braum stuff is going to get old within 48 hours, and
I can see that happening, man.
But when you look at, like, the things that they've kind of, like, buffed up, there's not, like, a ton, like it does feel like the gap between, like, high tier and low tier is going to be potentially, like, widening a bit. There's not a ton of the buffs from underutilized things that really feel significant. A lot of the regions might be like,
we'll see. Don't forget about Petty Officer giving some power to Bilgewater. We'll see, but definitely, definitely
the second one.
I'm gonna end it there.
I hope to God I'm wrong.
Jay Medarda is our Lord and Savior. Jay Medarda. Jay Medarda.
I will say that is a nice one. I really like the J buff.
Yeah. All right, we'll end it there. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a comment to basically give us your opinion on these changes. What do you expect of this metagame? And hopefully you enjoyed. Just to keep in mind that these podcasts happen bi-weekly, so every 2 weeks. And we'll be coming back at you for the next patch in a couple of weeks from now. And that's all I gotta say. Hope you guys are excited for some Braum meta. And of course, thank you to Swim and Panda for sticking around for this one. If you guys want to say anything, now is the time.
Mogwai is going to link the survey if you're interested in the link in the description. He'll remember this time because he always remembers.
Exactly. Thank you.
And it'll be there if you guys want to check it out and just see the results. And there are comparisons this time compared to the last one because they're a month apart, so it's a bit more interesting as well. The data. I think that's it for me. I will start streaming soon. Whoa. Really now.
I will say,
oh my god.
Me too. I'll also start streaming. So I've taken
double comeback.
Man,
I took a longer break than you, Swim, but I think we're now on the same
true.
page.
I don't know, man. I don't know if you guys know how little I've streamed. In the past, like 6 months.
I've noticed.
No, 6 weeks. I think I've streamed like 10 days out of the last 6 weeks or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
No, but it's nice to have you back, man. It is.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
I watched your video, and I hope all is good.
Oh, yeah. I'm on the upswing.
It was very relatable. I didn't go through like the same, but I've gone through like very similar shit personally. So yeah,
honestly,
just
man,
happy to see you do well.
That means a lot to me.
Oh, look at us, man. Ending on a good note after our fight over Nab and stuff. At least we got some drama this episode. Not bad, huh?
Yeah, this is much better.
Yeah, more exciting. All right. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.